Ready? Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to our virtual Open Iftar 2021, and thank you for joining us today on Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube. My name is Farah, and I will be your host for this evening. Now, we have got an absolutely exciting evening planned for this evening with Hafsah Dabiri. And before we get started, I would first like to thank our media partner for this year, Islam Channel, and give a special welcome to those joining us from Islam Channel's Facebook and YouTube. It's a pleasure to have you all with us today. I also want to thank the Arts Council, whose help has allowed us to continue our work this Ramadan, all of which is available on our website. This includes our virtual open iftars every night of Ramadan, our Ramadan late course for the first 18 days of Ramadan, so if you can get on there, and our My Open Iftar packs of 2021. Now, this year's packs not only help you to bring the Ramadan spirit into your home, but in collaboration with Islamic Relief, our charity partner, with each pack bought, you'll be feeding a person in need for a whole month. You can check out the incredible work that Islamic Relief does at iruk.co/RTP, and the link's also in the Zoom chat as well. Speaking of which, our open iftars are virtual and they're very interactive. And so it would be absolutely fantastic if you can all join in, turn your cameras on. If you can, it would be great to be able to see you. Now, for those who may not be familiar with Zoom, just a quick run through of the tech. Now, at the bottom of your screens or on the More section of your mobile, there's a reactions option. So you can show us how you're feeling in real time. There's also a raise hand option as well, for if you want to ask our speakers a question or add to this discussion, and someone from our back-end team will unmute you. So before we begin, I'm just going to go into today's agenda. So again, we have Hafsah Dabiri. Now, Hafsah is going to be speaking to us about creativity and inclusivity. And today, following that, we're going to have a Q&A around 7:30, followed by Maghrib Adhan at 8:03. So I think that's all the technical bits sorted out. And for those who are joining us on Islam Channel, if you'd like to interact with our speaker, with Hafsah, do please just jump on the Zoom, go to ramadan10project.com and click on the link, join us on Zoom, get involved and keep it interactive. It will be absolutely fantastic to have you join us. So I'm moving on to Hafsah. Before we start our talk, Hafsah, how are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. I think today's probably been the hardest day of the fast for me, just because it's a weekend, but alhamdulillah, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
How's your Ramadan going so far?
Yeah, it's a blessing. I can say that I've definitely been working hard. So it's not like last year I was at university during Ramadan. So it was quite different, I think, to working a 9 to 5 during the week. And I definitely am not enjoying it. But, you know, yeah, alhamdulillah for Ramadan. I think I'm trying to make the most of it as much as possible.
Are you working from home or do you need to go to the office?
Oh, thankfully working from home. I don't think I'm ever going to stop working from home after this experience of the pandemic, inshallah.
It's totally changed, you know, modern ways of working as well, hasn't it? So are you quite good at being disciplined, and during Ramadan, you know, how have you found that for years at home, to share how you're sort of finding juggling working at home?
Yeah, I think I really do enjoy the work that I do. So I think it really helps to have that aspect of things. And I think for me, it's just about waking up every morning and getting ready for the day. I think that really makes a difference to not feeling like you're, you know, sort of locked down and it's the same repetitiveness of every single day. And I think also just going outside for a cycle, for a walk every now and again is just super helpful in kind of building that energy. Obviously now it's Ramadan. I don't even think I'm going to see my bike until the end of Ramadan. But definitely walks, I think.
That's absolutely fantastic. And let's hear from Hafsah. Hafsah, a pleasure to have you as always.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. How's your day going?
Alhamdulillah, good. It was a nice day. Today we got the sun in London, so enjoying the day, alhamdulillah, really. It's enlightening our life, actually. Every time there is sun, we feel good. This is like how it is.
Having sunshine really helps.
Yeah.
So, you know what? Let's try and get things a little bit more interactive. So we've got a few salams going on in the chat box. Where's everyone calling from today? Because I can see some different names in our participants today. Can you pop in the chat box where you're calling from? It'll be absolutely fantastic to know what's happening. And what we're going to do is, whilst we wait for responses coming through the chat box, how was your fast today? So I've got a poll there, so let's hear about how everyone's fast was going today. Was it easy? Was it okay? Was it difficult? Okay, so far the okays are, everyone's had an okay. Oh no, a few easies in there. That's, oh yeah, it's definitely changed. Everyone seems to have like a easy to okay day today, so nobody's had a difficult day. That's really good. I think, like you said, Hafsah, now it's not so, the weather's getting a little bit better. It's just so much nicer as well, and it can make things a little bit easier when, as you say, Hafsah, when the sun is out and you're out and about. That's good. Everyone has had an okay fast day, although no one's had an easy one, as you guys can see. So Rehan, what are you having for iftar today? Rehan, we were chatting earlier, and Rehan seems like he's been a superstar today because he's just been at it all day. Rehan, you tell the other guys how awesome you've been today.
Oh, you hyped me out too much. I literally just went with my dad to help shopping and stuff in the garden and stuff for my mom. Yeah, don't hype me up too much, please. Yeah, but what we do. So yeah, mom, we made nahari. So me and my dad went to get nahari, the lamb. So for those who don't know, nahari is a Pakistani and Indian actually sort of dish. So it's lamb chunks and it's like a lamb curry kind of thing. So yeah, that's what we're having for iftar.
That sounds fantastic. You've also been putting up, you said, doing lots of hard work in the gardens. That's quite admirable when you have a fast, I have to say. So yeah, I bet your mum and dad really, really appreciated the help with that.
Well, my mom's been cooking all day as well, so she's good.
Wow, so you're going to have like a feast today, aren't you?
I don't know. No, you know what? We've actually been really good this Ramadan. Like last 2-3 days, we've literally just had leftovers. And because we've been actually really efficient with the food. And I think my mom's cooked today, but I think it's mostly for the week. And because it's just the three of us, we do generally have the food is not actually as much. And over the years we've got a lot more sort of controlled in how much food we make and what we do with that. So that's worked out really well actually.
Are you having any samosas or pakoras today?
No, we don't have that much fried food actually. We haven't had fried stuff for good last few years actually, which is actually really good to be honest. I think we have occasionally when maybe someone would come around, but obviously no one really can come around this year.
So my mum made pakoras 2 days ago. Oh gosh, and I have to say I really enjoy them. Who actually in the chat box? Oh, if you don't know what samosas and pakoras, I'll pop that in the chat box as well. But yeah, who is actually having samosas today? Or pakoras today? I'd be really intrigued to know what they're having. Hafsah, what are you having for iftar? Let me just unmute you. Here we go.
Yeah, so I was just going to add to that and say that I think I'm definitely going to have some samosas today, hopefully. We haven't been great with the fried food. I think it's just, it's comfort at the moment. We've been having a lot of salad and a lot of fruit and smoothies and stuff like that to kind of counterbalance it. If it works like that, I don't know. But yeah, definitely some samosas today, I think, at iftar time.
Oh gosh, that sounds absolutely delicious. And can I ask you, do you have African style samosas?
I think there's
Nigerian background, or do you have like South Asian style samosas? Okay, somebody's put, that's the question. Hafsah, we had that in last year's iftar as well. Okay, so I always think, African samosas are the best, but I'm a little bit biased like that.
Yeah, I think we're having South Asian style samosas today. I think we're a bit lazy. We just bought the freezer ones from Morrison's. But yeah, no, we to be honest, I don't think in Nigeria we have a style of samosa. I think in Somalia they have sambusa, which is obviously sort of East African. But I don't think on the West African side we've got an alternative. But yeah, we snag the South Asian ones every now and again.
But do you know what that leads really nicely to a talk about creativity and inclusivity, because I always think food is one of those things that really really unites us. And I was thinking about your topic today, your talk about creativity and inclusivity, And do you know what? I'd love to hear in the chat box, you know, what that means to everyone, what creativity, what inclusivity means. When I was a child, I always used to think, you know, that being creative meant being artistic. And my mum and sister are fantastic artists, and you know, they can draw so well. And I always used to think, oh, you know, that's the definition of creativity. You know, I wish I could draw. But, you know, as time's gone by, I think of creativity now as, you know, well, finding innovative ways to create solutions or innovative ways to work. So that's what I think about, you know, creativity. And yeah, and that everyone can do it. Everyone has their own ways of working. Everyone has their own ways of contributing. So I'd be really, really interested to hear from the audience, you know, what they think about creativity and inclusivity. Pop it in the chat box. So what I'm going to do, Hafsah, I'm just going to tell our audience a little bit about you. So as I said, Hafsah is, she's an author. She's written, it's Basirah, the basketball player, right? Hafsah says she's, yeah, absolutely fantastic. She's an author, she's a consultant. She works on inclusivity. She develops methods to help understand the different needs of communities through empathy, equity, and inclusivity. And Hafsah is a London-based author. She's a diversity and inclusion consultant and social media specialist. And she has a background in politics and international relations with experience in investment management, leading to a global publication as well, and advising at the highest levels of UK politics, as well as doing diversity, in equity and inclusion consulting. So, Hafsah, on that note, over to you for your talk today, which we're all really looking forward to.
Thank you so much, Jazakallah khair. I always like to begin kind of any presentation that I do with a question to the audience, and I feel like we've been handing out a lot of questions today, but inshallah this will be the only one from me. And I want to ask everyone, as a child, what did you dream of being when you grew up? And if you can just kind of put that into the chat box, have a think about it as we go through this presentation, inshallah. But as mentioned, I published a book called Basirah, the basketballer says inshallah, and it was my debut book, so the first ever book that I ever published. And one of the reasons why this book was very important to me was because I genuinely wrote it for the younger version of myself. I've never thought of myself as someone who could write or someone who was creative. I kind of dabbled in it here and there, but I think growing up in an African household just meant that it was like, yeah, it was never going to be a route for me that I could pursue as a job. And so I kind of just concentrated on my academics, more on the academic side of things. But the book itself, I've got a copy of it here actually. So it features a character that is Black, she's Muslim, she wears hijab, and she's a woman. And those are obviously all things that I am at the moment, hopefully forever. And I think when it comes to identity, there are so many different conflicts that we're faced with, whether it's racism, whether it's misogyny, whether it's classism, whether it's anti-Blackness within the Muslim community. And when it comes to the identity of Black Muslim women, I just felt as if the representation was sparse. And it's sparse in terms of, the representation of Black people in the media, but then it's also sparse in terms of racial representation as well. And so for me, growing up in London, I felt, London is very, very multicultural. But when I was in primary school, I went to a Muslim primary school to start off with in Tooting. And it was a great experience in terms of like learning the foundation of Islam. But I very much, stood out as the only Black person in the class. And it was a majority Asian and Arab community. And a lot of the questions sort of arose as to where my Blackness fit into Islam, I think at that point at a young age. And then I went to I did my second half of my primary school experience in a public school in South London, which was very much, majority Black. And that was a great experience, I think, to kind of see people who were from the same country as me. But then again, it was like, okay, so where does my Islam fit into the sort of archetypal sort of Blackness that's shown here? And there was, it was, I think growing up, there was just a lot of situations where I realized that actually representation was lacking, and I didn't understand how my Blackness and my Islam kind of fit together. And I think that that goes for a lot of different people in a lot of different ways, whether it be to do with people with differing abilities, people with disabilities, people who grow up in predominantly sort of male households, and then, you know, as a woman, seeing Islam from a very different perspective to how you may have seen it if you grew up in a predominantly female household. And I feel like when it came to the idea of inclusivity, it was about giving a voice to the younger version of me and providing that support and providing that insight into the fact that actually people like you do exist, and your hijab doesn't have to be the most magical thing about you that, you know, the media kind of draw upon and utilize and weaponize. Rather, your voice, your experiences, your actions are the things that matter. And so for me, storytelling was the best way to get this across, because I believe that stories are powerful. I gave a talk earlier this year at Cheltenham Literature Festival on the topic of diversifying the dreams of children. And it's literally the idea that, you know, as a child, we have so many influences, whether it's Harry Potter, whether it's Tracy Beaker, all of these books that we kind of read as children. But where are the stories that allow our dreams to be diversified? Where are we seeing hijabi girls who are astronauts, who are scientists, who are all of these things that we could dream of being? And I think there is so much privilege in being able to see yourself in a book. And we as individuals who have the ability to write should provide that privilege to people who look like us. And so I just, for me, Basirah the basketballer was literally that. It was a way of me talking to myself and talking to people who look like me. And also I think it was a counter against this idea of secularism within inclusivity, which I think is increasingly happening, where we're leaving out the topic of religion when it comes to inclusivity in the mainstream. There's so many other forms of inclusivity, whether it's disability, whether it's sexuality, and those are very, very important things in terms of creating spaces for people. But I think there's also the element of religion that just gets pushed to the side as something that's not important. And whenever we do have conversations about religion, it's always around the hijab or the niqab and, you know, conversations around that. But really, when we talk about religion, we're talking about tawakkul, we're talking about trusting in God, we're talking about building confidence in ourselves through our religion. And I think that that is such an important conversation that needs to be had surrounding inclusivity. And it's one of the key elements of the book. Basirah kind of goes on this journey of, she wants to be the basketball captain essentially, but she doesn't get it. And through that, she kind of learns that there are going to be obstacles in life that she is going to face as an individual. But through that, she can build her trust in Allah, she can build her trust in her Lord, and then she can also build her trust in herself. I think a lot of the time, again, when it comes to children, you know, when they don't succeed at something, it reflects on them and their individualism and their personality. And I think we have to take away the idea of failure as a personality type, and rather it's an experience that you can learn from and you can overcome and you can better yourself through that. And I think also when it comes to us as adults, a huge part of our life is tawakkul, a huge part of our faith is trusting in Allah. And it's important that we kind of build that idea from a very young age, that even with those trials that we face, ease will come, inshallah. And you kind of have to just go with the flow and really kind of find your way through it, inshallah. So I don't want to take too long. I think that's kind of a good summary of how I believe that sort of creativity and inclusivity fit in, but under the scope of Islam and representation. And I'm happy to sort of answer any questions, inshallah, that anyone has. But someone said that it was Hawazin said that astronaut was one of her dreams. Mashallah, mashallah. If anybody else has their dreams that they'd like to share as well, I'd really like to hear that. But I think just to kind of round up, that it's, you know, having books that showed a sort of a hijabi as an astronaut would uplift that dream for other people as well. I think that it's not something that young kids would say every now and again, that I want to be an astronaut, and we have to open up those conversations and open up that world of possibilities that sometimes seems quite shut out to different communities. and inshallah we're able to do that, whether it's through writing, whether it's through our individual families and the conversations that we open up, and whether it's through creativity, or just sharing our stories in general through conversation. But I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy, inshallah.
Thank you so much. That's absolutely fantastic. Just lovely, really inspiring. I was going to go through the comments. So yeah, we have a businesswoman, teacher, astronaut. It'll be interesting to hear from the others. You know, what did you guys want to be growing up? And if anyone has any comments or questions for Hafsah, do please post them in the chat box. I've been making them lots of notes. It's just been, yeah. And I think, you know, it's very interesting what you say about Black wearing being very sparsely represented. And can I ask you, particularly in religion as well, you touched on that. So how can religion, in your opinion, be incorporated into inclusivity?
Yeah, I think when it comes to, I can't speak for other religions, but generally when it comes to Islam, the foundation of the religion is justice. And I feel like when it comes to the conversation about diversity and inclusion, a lot of the time it's about equality, but I don't think equality is the conversation we should be having. It should be equity. It should be looking at, rather than providing everyone with the same opportunity, it should be how can we ensure that those who have less of an opportunity are given more opportunities, essentially. And so looking at everybody based on their means, based on what they can offer, based on kind of a holistic understanding of who the individual is to be able to provide support, essentially. I think I think a lot of the time when it comes to D&I, the conversation of equality is just kind of a fail-safe where they can kind of just tick a box and say that, okay, they provided an opportunity. They don't really have to look at the other issues and the intersections that means that actually there are minorities within minorities that aren't going to be helped by these schemes that we are kind of putting out in general. And so, yeah, I think Islam is really the foundation of understanding that even when it comes to zakat, for example, not everybody pays the same amount. You pay from what you have on a yearly basis, and that 2.5% is very, very small. But then, you know, if your wealth is small, that 2.5% is going to be even smaller. And then when we look at where the zakat even goes to, it goes to people who need it the most within the local community. And it's not, you know, kind of spread out as a tax that everybody has to pay a certain amount. And I think, yeah, as I said, it's just the idea of justice, justice really, yeah.
So touching on from that point, how can we ensure that those with fewer opportunities are given more opportunities?
Yeah, I think it definitely depends on the context that we're looking at. I, for one, a lot of the consulting that I do currently is within institutions, but then also when it comes to sort of brand marketing. And I think that when it comes to opportunities, I would say that we have to try not to make assumptions about people's experiences. I think that that's the initial step. When we make assumptions about how people experience life and what people need, then we end up providing solutions that are based off of our own thoughts and wants and experiences rather than what they need, essentially. And so I think when we look at organizations, especially I think a lot of the zakat organizations in the UK, they do a lot of good work in the sense that they go directly to individuals and really have conversations and see what they need and sort of provide for those specific needs. So I think a lot of the time when it comes to anybody who is having a conversation about making whatever space they're in more inclusive or more diverse, don't make assumptions about what you think people need. Essentially, it would be good to kind of maybe do a survey or have a focus group and really sit down and listen to what the community needs, essentially.
How do you feel, I think you touched on a really good point there about surveys and focus groups. Do you feel that's something that can easily be implemented at present in the Islamic faith? Because you said you have had some challenges there, or is that something that you find is happening as well when it comes to religion and so forth? You know, how can we get people to participate in surveys? How can we get them to participate in focus groups? Is that something, yesterday was very interesting about women and women's journeys, and how can we get more women to sort of take a leading role on these?
Yeah, definitely. So I think
that their voices, Black Muslim women, like as you said, so that their voices can be heard.
Yeah, definitely, inshallah. So I think one of the things that I began about 2 years ago was the Discovery Talk Show, which was a space for Black Muslims in the UK to kind of come together and have a conversation. And I think it's about framing outreach as something that's actually a space for them to engage in a safe way. And that's essentially what we did with the talk show, that it was like, you know, you can come here as a Black Muslim, this is a space created for you, and it's created for you in a really holistic way, not that you just come in and you're having a conversation, but, you know, the food is served by people in your community, the entertainment is people in your community, the hosts are people in the community that you know. And it's really about creating these safe spaces that show that you're not kind of just doing this on a one-off and doing it in a really tokenistic way, but rather you do want to hear their voice and you do want them to feel comfortable. And I think even when you're talking about how you should outreach to these communities, it's about asking the communities how they want to be reached out to, and what would make them feel more comfortable and what they would be receptive to. And then I think also, even just in terms of space, can be very powerful in that dynamic of power. Inviting people into your community sometimes isn't the best way to hear their opinions. Maybe it's about walking into their community and sitting down and just being an onlooker, a participant, rather than kind of taking up space. And so, yeah, I think there's definitely different ways. It just depends on the context again, inshallah.
Thank you so much. And we also have some questions in the audience. So we have a question from Sarah. So let's see, Sarah, let's get you on. Sarah, I'm just going to unmute you. It's Sarah Hassan. Here we go.
Assalamu alaikum.
Sarah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. Very nice to see you. Yes, this was very inspiring. And I want to ask you, like, ideally, I know, like, the spaces that do accommodate us is very easy to, like, express your creative self within those spaces. I was wondering, like, have you ever faced, or were you ever put in a situation where you're, like, the only one in a space that's not accommodating? And how did you deal with those challenges that come in being, like, the first one in those kind of spaces? And do you think, as Muslim women of color, or, you know, as Muslim women in general, we should try to be those firsts in those spaces to sort of pave the way for others?
Thank you so much for that question. I think both of those questions really resonated with me, mashallah. And just to answer your last question first, I would say that we as Muslim women and anybody kind of who comes from a minority community or minorities within minorities, and I use minorities very, very carefully here, I would say that we shouldn't put ourselves in a position where we feel like we always have to be the people who kind of deal with the trauma of kind of explaining ourselves to people. I think when I first, I studied politics and international relations when I was at university, and I think within the university kind of politics space, we were kind of always pushed to be at the forefront of campaigns and kind of be the first people to speak and always have to kind of deal with and debate with people. And I found it very, very taxing, and I found that we shouldn't have to have that responsibility to explain ourselves, essentially. And so if you are in a space where you feel uncomfortable expressing your creativity because of kind of the questions that you might be faced with, be very comfortable with stepping back. It's not your responsibility to kind of have to deal with that trauma and take up that space, but if you do feel comfortable, definitely take that step because it could be beneficial. In terms of the first question, I would say that it was actually quite funny. It was the Cheltenham Literature Festival that I went to a couple of months ago that I mentioned before. And it was obviously in Cheltenham, and because of the lockdown, a majority of the people who attended were people who lived locally in Cheltenham, and Cheltenham is obviously majority white, majority middle-aged women and men who are kind of settling down away from London. And I hadn't realized this. I don't know what I thought the audience was going to be like, but when I walked in, I was literally the only person obviously in hijab in Cheltenham, but then I was the only Black person, the only person of color, I think, entirely within that space. And I was sitting there with, you know, my copy of Basirah the Basketballer in my hand, ready to talk about religion and, you know, racism and anti-blackness. And I kind of just sat there thinking, I've prepared the entirely wrong form of presentation for this audience in front of me. But I didn't change my presentation. I didn't change a word of it. I still went ahead and told my story the way that I normally tell it, and spoke about things very honestly within the space in terms of the lack of representation within literature and why religion needs to be spoken about more, even when it comes to children. And I dealt with a lot of very hard questions from the audience, but we had, you know, at the end of the presentation, we had different people come up to us saying, you know, we want to work on this, we're trying to implement this, and you know, saying that they were very much inspired and their eyes were opened by the presentation. And so I would say that it's definitely it's an individual choice and an individual journey as to whether or not you want to take up take up those opportunities and do that, but there can be a lot of benefit from it, and we shouldn't have to change our narratives to please other people. I would say that very much stick to the story that you want to tell, because your stories are powerful and you never know who can be impacted by them, inshallah.
Jazakallah, this was amazing. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Such inspiring words. We have lots of questions coming in as well in the chat box, and also you speak about your journey. What impact has your faith had on your journey, and what challenges have you faced with regards to that as well? Because I read on your Instagram page that you weren't welcome in certain spaces once you started wearing your niqab.
Yeah, definitely. I think even before I wore the niqab, when it comes to Basirah the Basketballer, the book, when it first came out, there was, comments I was seeing on Twitter from different communities. There was especially one, I think, from an Arab man who was saying that his child would never be able to read this book because the character doesn't look like his child. And it was very interesting, I think, to kind of see the privilege that exists within certain communities, even when it comes to individuals within the Muslim community. But I think situations like that really help to remind me why it was important that we write books that look like this, because if there was such an uproar at the fact that the child on the cover was of a slightly darker skin tone and would represent a lot of little girls around the world, then that's an issue. That's a big issue that we have to keep writing. We have to make sure that it's not an issue in the years to come, inshallah. But when it comes to the niqab as well, I think it's quite funny because I never thought that my first initial experiences of choosing to cover in this way would be negative, and negative from the Muslim community. I kind of thought that, okay, I would have to kind of deal with the non-Muslim community. Everyone's wearing masks, but people still dislike the niqab, and I thought that would be my biggest issue. But walking out of my house was completely fine. But I would come online and I would do sort of lives with different organizations, and a lot of the comments would be from Muslim men who would be asking why I've chosen to cover, and would have horrible things to say about the fact that I've chosen to cover. And so I think at that point as well, it just reminded me that you can't please anyone, no matter what you do, no matter if you choose to not cover entirely and people have things to say about that, or you choose to wear the hijab in a certain way and people have things to say about that. And I think it comes back to the idea of tawakkul and having trust in Allah and really doing things for his sake alone. Because if you do things for the sake of people, unfortunately, we're going to be very disappointed, because people are, we're just imperfect. We're made imperfectly. But yeah, I would say that definitely trusting in Allah through those circumstances, and just realizing that actually, wait, yeah, as Sarah said, the irony of it all, truly, that you truly can't please anyone. But yeah, that was my experience.
That's very true. And in fact, that leads us really nicely onto Hawazin's question. So over to you, Hawazin.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, Hafsah, for your talk. Barakallah fik. So my question is, how does the diversity increase creativity?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. Jazakallah khair. I think diversity really challenges what we see as the mainstream form of creativity. When we decide to kind of step outside of our boxes and really see things through other people's eyes and their experiences, it really helps to push the bounds of what even we're capable of as creatives. And I think that it also adds a level of sort of reality and humanism to what we create, because it's no longer kind of just, you know, abstract. You're kind of looking at abstract from the experience of different people. For example, one of the books that I've been working on quite recently is kind of a male perspective of his relationship with his father in a Muslim household, and I feel like that's something that's not discussed a lot. We kind of have a lot of books that focus on the relationship between children and their mother, but not really of that of a father, especially because the role of a father is very much kind of, he's going out to work and he's earning all of this money, but what about the side of it that actually can be quite difficult, with him not being able to spend time with his family, or how they experience certain emotions, and how that, you know, how the children kind of perceive their dads, etc. And so for me, it was really interesting to kind of have the experience of looking at the world through the eyes of my brother, for example, and really kind of asking him questions and delving into the experience that he had with my dad, and doing the same with other people in my community. And I think when you definitely kind of seek to diversify whatever you're doing, whether it's your creative work or your day-to-day work, it makes you a better person. It makes you more understanding. It makes you more empathetic. And I feel like that's, if that's the outcome of your art, then, you know, that's a blessing. Alhamdulillah.
Jazakallah khairan.
Thank you so much. That's right, you know, diversity does make you more empathetic. You know, it does really change your when you seek to undertake those goals. It does change your thought process, and hopefully makes, you know, you and your attitude towards those around you a lot more inclusive. And I think it's fantastic that, you know, you're working on a male perspective at the moment. I agree that, you know, very few books do reflect on paternal interactions. So when is that sort of going to be out? And also following on from that, and what books inspired you as a child?
Yeah, so on the date of the book, I can't actually release that information yet, but it will be on my Instagram as soon as that's available, inshallah. In terms of the books that inspired me when I was younger, I think I really enjoyed, I think I mentioned this already, but the Tracy Beaker kind of series, because I think I grew up obviously in a household with both parents, alhamdulillah, and I just, the experience of a child kind of in a foster system and sort of grappling with this sort of want to have a mother and to find a parent, I think really kind of made me value what I had. And I think it was the first kind of book that I read that tackled such a huge topic of adoption and the foster care system in a way that children could really understand and benefit from. And I think that kind of pushed me to want to write books that kind of tackle topics that people might think are too bigger topic for children to, you know, be interacting with, when really it can provide a lot of benefit and empathy for children to be equipped with the correct language, I think, as to how to deal with these topics and communicate these topics, and have conversations with people who are going through those things. And so inshallah, I feel like in the future, I definitely want to tackle kind of the bigger topics that even parents maybe might not have the language or be equipped with the language to discuss with their children, especially from an Islamic perspective, inshallah.
Absolutely fantastic. That sounds really exciting. Really, really can't wait to see what you're working on next. And speaking of which, that you know, leads us over to Rehan. So Rehan, over to you for your question.
So what would you feel is your biggest achievement in your work in the last year?
Oh, that is a great question. I would say the impact that the book has had. I think I genuinely wrote the book in about 30 minutes and sent it off to just publishers online, and I didn't think much of it. I think it was my mum and my sister who pushed me to kind of you know, send it to publishers, and it was picked up, and then from then on it's kind of just had a life of its own. And I remember I was at I was reading at the Halal Food Festival that happens in London before lockdown, and a teacher, an American teacher, came up to me and she said that she teaches at a boys' school, but she wanted to purchase multiple copies of the book to show it to her students. And it was a non-Muslim boys' school. I think it was a Christian boys' school, actually. And she was just saying that she feels like this book would help to literally diversify their minds, just to have, you know, that other experience, and to learn how to just learn, I think, about the different identities that actually exist, and the fact that there are other religions, there are people of different faith groups, and you know, this is the one experience of you know, a Black Muslim woman, and I think that for me was very powerful, that I had initially written this book for children who look like me, when really the impact can be felt for children who completely look the opposite to me, essentially, as well. And so for that reason, we're kind of now trying to push the book in the direction of a movie. And so we're currently like fundraising on Launch Good. And I think, inshallah, as that begins to grow, the impact, inshallah, is definitely going to be kind of one of the biggest achievements, I think, probably of my life, essentially, I think, at this point.
That's fantastic. Gosh, but they're coming in. All the questions are coming in. And for those who haven't posted so far, we would love to hear from you. We'd also, you know, any questions or comments that you have for Hafsah, do put them in the chat box. It'll be great to hear, you know, what you're thinking. Anyone who's on Islam channel, do join in, do jump on the Zoom. Let's hear from you. And let's keep this really, really interactive as we can. So we do get a diverse opinion. Isn't that right, Hafsah?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Pfizer has a question. Were there any challenges that you faced to get published? So yeah, that's quite interesting. So, you know, what spaces, you know, were there any spaces that were more challenging to enter, or any that were more welcoming?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely on the sort of the beginning of my journey when it comes to publishing. I would say that I took the easy route of just finding a publisher that actually had published books that were similar to mine. And so, for example, Ruqayyah's bookshelf, her books are very, very dynamic, and she's an independent publisher as well. And the kind of books that she put out, just they kind of they resonate with a lot of different topics, I think, in the world that we kind of need to hear about at this point. And so I think one of the biggest tips that I would give for anybody who's trying to get published is to really do a lot of research about which publisher has books that that basically fit the audience and the genre that you're trying to replicate, and that will be the best way, I think, of sort of entering into the market. But I think that once you've gotten your first book out, it's definitely a lot easier to have conversations with other publishers surrounding your second book and your third book, and etc. And I would also say that it's good to get other writing experience. So whether it's writing for a publication or just writing your own blog online, just so that people can see the style of work that you have, and then the audience also that is kind of built around that work that you put out, inshallah.
Fantastic. And sort of coming on to where do you see yourself in the future, coming into the future? What sort of work would you like to do? You've mentioned the film, you mentioned the book, and you know, were there other work that you do around equity and inclusivity? Where do you see yourself? What else would you like to be working on?
I definitely want to be in a position to help people get published. I want to be able to kind of take them on that journey, help them get from start to finish, help them market their books, and really, I think, essentially just have a publishing house that kind of focuses on the topics that are really huge within our community that need to be tackled in a creative way, to be able to, as I said before, kind of equip parents and children with you know, helpful language as to how to deal with these things in day to day. And so that's definitely, I think, the direction that I want to go in, whether that's, you know, publishing in terms of books, but then also movies as well, I think will be quite exciting to consider. And I think just in general, kind of work with children. When Basirah the basketballer came out, we did a lot of touring across the UK with different Islamic schools and non-Muslim schools, and we kind of just went in, we read the book, but then we also had a lot of huge conversations with the kids about confidence and God and hijab and all of these really, really big topics that I think are perfectly sort of introduced through the book. So yeah, I think, yeah, definitely just in that direction of things, inshallah.
Fantastic. And sounds like exciting days are ahead of you, inshallah. And you know, you'll all the best with that. And we have a question, I think, from Riaz. So Riaz, are you okay? I've heard that you have a question. Are you okay to come on? I'll just hopefully he can come. Riaz can come on next. Okay, so whilst we wait for Riaz to get back to us, how with the current pandemic, how do you feel, or what impact do you feel that the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, has had on inclusivity, and on another note, on creativity as well? Do you feel it's helped, or do you feel it's hindered creativity and inclusivity, and also the process of diversity?
Yeah, I think that in some senses it may have sort of hindered the kind of push for inclusivity, I think, with the workspace context, just because, you know, there's no longer a need for them to facilitate that sort of thing within the workspace. It's now that if you need to pray, you kind of just tap out of, you know, wherever you are, or just leave your laptop and you go and pray, etc. But I would say that a new dimension to inclusivity is sort of opened, which I think happens with every sort of development within a working environment. And I think it's the idea of sort of people with differing abilities, essentially in different sort of working home contexts. For example, if people had children, they were obviously more at home when the schools were shut down. So how the way in which workplaces rather, and organizations were able to deal with that, I think, is another dimension of inclusivity. And I think also when it comes to people with differing abilities, whether they're able to kind of ship different desks and chairs and all of that kind of stuff out to employees, I think is again another kind of dimension of inclusivity. So I think it was definitely kind of pushed back in some ways, but kind of progressed in a different form, I think, at that point. And then when it comes to creativity, I would say on a, like personally for me, I was able to really kind of sit down and think about what I want to create, and really have the time to kind of balance that with my day to day. I could just find snippets of my day to write, and just whenever I had an idea from something, I'd be able to kind of just write it down and work on it straight away, because I was just in my zone, in my space at home. But I would say that there was a lot less of kind of ideas, I think, during lockdown. I think just generally not being around people and having really interesting conversations all the time, and kind of just seeing what people are doing outside, those were definitely things that did inspire forms of writing or ideas or that kind of thing. So yeah, I think there was benefit in lockdown, but there was also kind of some things that were taken away. But as they say, we pivot and we find a new way, inshallah. So yeah.
Fantastic. And moving on from that, I think, yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Lockdown has been a mixed bag for everyone. For some, it's been very challenging. For some, it's been an opportunity to be reflective, to be creative. And as we move into Ramadan, so for those who don't know, you know, in the UK, we're slowly coming out of lockdown. Our last Ramadan was in lockdown, so it was a very different experience. So this Ramadan, how do you feel that for those in our audience, how can we work on our empathy in Ramadan? And yeah, we'll start off with that one, then I have another one as well.
I think charity is the biggest way, I think, during this Ramadan, to really kind of look at the different causes that are out there, and see the condition of people around the world. We might not be able to, you know, whether or not we were in lockdown, people are still unable to find food, they're unable to find shelter, and so I think during this lockdown, really taking it onto yourself to give, and to give without being prompted as well, I think is super important. I think we always kind of say to ourselves that, I don't know, we kind of just have it in our mind that we need to be inspired to give charity, and we wait for, you know, that really emotive verse of the Quran to be recited and for people to call upon us. But I think really to develop empathy by yourself, it's really important to kind of go and give out of the goodness of your heart, and kind of just understanding that people need it, and you're blessed to have some at different points in time. So it's good to give, I think, at that point.
Also, how can we use this time and as we emerge out of lockdown to be more creative? And it's interesting. So from an Islamic perspective, also, what are your thoughts on creativity as well? So there's lots of different thoughts out there. So, you know, I'd be intrigued to hear, you know, what your opinions are, you know, about creativity and religion. And,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think that when it comes to Islam, we are, you know, we're told to look for the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and those are the things that really help us to develop our faith. And I think that creativity is literally a search for the signs of Allah. When we see what people draw, what people create, it's all from what they're imagining could be possible, and that is kind of just showing what the vastness of this world is and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala truly is capable of. And so for me, I just think that when you seek to be creative in that way, it's kind of just you attesting to the majesty of Allah. And so whatever form it's in during lockdown, I would say that everyone should kind of just kind of step out of their comfort zone and really try to don't label yourself as I'm a good drawer or I'm a horrible writer or I'm, you know, don't give yourself those labels. Kind of step out of that and really test what you're capable of. And it doesn't have to be for, you know, for an audience or for someone to kind of, you know, give you a round of applause for it, but just for you as an individual to have time to reflect, to try something new, to, you know, to just, you know, push your talents, I think, and push your skills, I think is super important. I never thought I was a good writer. I've always, you know, just said I was bad at spelling and, you know, I probably didn't get my point across properly and all of those kind of things. But now it's something that I'm actually pursuing. And I think that, yeah, you never know what you're capable of essentially until you try.
That's just wonderful. And just before we end, so we've got 5 minutes until alarm time, or sorry, 6 minutes until alarm time. And before that, we'll have some time for reflection as well. The last 2 questions are one from Sarah, one from Sakina. First one is, where can, you know, the audience members get hold of your book? And the second question is from Sakina, who wants to ask how to publish poetry. So yeah, over to you.
Thank you. So in terms of the book, I will send the link, inshallah, into the chat. It's available to publish at purchase at Ruqayyah's bookshelf. And if you also want to support the movie, you can visit launchgood.com/Basirah, I think it is. And in terms of publishing poetry, there are a few actually publishing houses that I think are catered towards Muslims that publishes poetry exclusively, or I think it might not be catered towards Muslims. I think it's just generally kind of a diverse poetry publisher. So I'll see if I can find inshallah the link to that, and if you could drop me a message maybe somewhere, I can put my email into the chat, and then I'll make sure to inshallah send that through to you. But definitely have a Google. I think Google, I didn't know about Ruqayyah's bookshelf before I wanted to get the book published. I just did a Google and was kind of just searching very carefully for the different kind of niches and independent publishers that did exist. And I would also say follow people who have already published poetry that you like, or publish poetry that kind of fits your genre, and have a look at who published them and what their process was like and that kind of thing. Inshallah, that can definitely help.
That's been helpful for you, Sakina, and thank you so much also, Sarah, for your question. Now, before we finish, we just love for you to share just some final words of reflection in the next couple of minutes or so, about how, you know, how you found the event, and yeah, how you see the rest of your Ramadan going, and also about final words for creativity and inclusivity. You've really inspired the audience today. It's been an absolutely fantastic discussion. We've had lots and lots of questions. You know, you've been a fantastic speaker, so we really, really value that. And just some final words to leave our audience on, please.
Yeah, I think it's always really nice, I think, to join RTP every single year. Alhamdulillah, for the last, I think, 2-3 years it's been. And it's funny because obviously in the last years I wasn't a niqabi, but now I'm kind of coming back with the face veil, and I think it's really nice. Alhamdulillah, thank you for always kind of welcoming me and making the space somewhere where it's easy to talk and just have a great time. Jazakallah khair, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward the efforts of the entire team, everyone who's kind of working hard behind the scenes, sending out all of those emails, chasing me up, and really kind of creating this space for hundreds of Muslims, thousands of Muslims every single year. And I'm really, really happy, alhamdulillah, that even through the pandemic, the Ramadan tent has still been able to kind of like push through and have an amazing schedule for everyone. So yeah, Jazakallah khair, and I pray that the blessings of this month are extended to you all as well. All of your du'as are answered, all of the goodness of this world and the next that you pray for, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant it to you. And yeah, and just in terms of last words on the topic, I want to stress to anybody who might be listening, who has a story to tell or a piece of art that they want to create or a poem that they want the world to read, that don't give up on what you think you're capable of. And also, if you're in the position where you're currently sort of downplaying or minimizing what you think you're capable of, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, he is the greatest, and he is in control of your destiny, not the words of other people or the negative thoughts that kind of nag at you. So really do push through that, because you never know who needs to hear what you have to say or what you have to share to the world. And that can be powerful, inshallah, and your impact can be powerful. So yeah, inshallah, just push through.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Hafsah. You know, it's been a fantastic event. It's been very engaging. It's very inspiring. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. And thank you also for, the fantastic audience and the questions. As usual, it's been interactive. We've loved having you on. We're looking forward to joining us regularly during Ramadan. Now, in the last minute or so before Adhan, I just want to say a thank you again to our media partner, Islam Channel, and to the Arts Council UK for making this event possible. Now, don't forget to get your own exciting My Open Iftar packs and check out all our work at ramadantentproject.com, and also read more about how we're fighting world hunger with Islamic relief at iruk.co/RTP. Now, Ramadan is a month of charity and giving, so we wanted to tell you all about Launch Good's Ramadan Challenge. With the Ramadan Challenge, you can automatically give your support to different projects around the world, setting up a donation amount to give to different campaigns daily and throughout the month. Now, for everyone who signs up to the Ramadan Challenge using our link, RTP will be given a top-up of $50 from Launch Good. You can sign up at launchgood.com/Team RTP. We'll now have a few moments reflection before Adhan. Thank you so much for joining us today.
اللهم إني لك صمت وبك آمنت وعلى رزقك أفطرت، ذهب الظمأ وابتلت العروق وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
Thank you once again for joining us today. It's been an absolutely fantastic session. We've had Hafsah Dabiri on today, and it's been great. We've loved listening to you, listening to your comments, your questions, keeping it interactive as also. So keep doing that. Keep joining us during Ramadan. We have some exciting events planned for you. We have an iftar with Dr. Craig Considine tomorrow, and a live cook along with Asma Khan from Darjeeling on Monday. So make sure you're prepared for that. We'd love to see you cooking along. Get all your ingredients tomorrow. And once again, a big thank you to our media partner, Islam Channel, and to the Arts Council UK. Enjoy your evening and